Turn to our bulletins today in the 5-point outline. I invite you to grab that at this time. Every mission has parameters. I know I've met George and a few other folks who've got a military background here. Those of you who've been on military missions know that the parameters of the mission are vital because they set the playing field for the mission. No one embarks upon a mission without a clear understanding of what the playing field will be like. What are the goals? What are the objectives? What can we hope to gain if we're successful in this mission? What does success look like? Well, as a church, I think two parameters set the playing field. They set the basic game rules for our mission to reach the unchurched and make it. Both of them are very counterintuitive, but I promise you they'll make sense if you hang with me. Number one, our first mission parameter is that Macon doesn't need another church. Macon does not need another church, my friends. That is not why Cross Connection was planted. That is not why we're here on this corner today. If you are looking for a church where you can sing some songs about Jesus, hear a pastor preach you a sermon, and have somebody visit you in the hospital when you get sick, let me just hold up a map of Greater Macon right here. I will blindfold you, give you a dart. You can throw the dart at the map. I guarantee you, you'll hit pretty close to one of those churches. We've got plenty of religion happening in this town. Good God, we certainly don't need another church. And can I tell you something fascinating? Did you know that the city of Rome in Jesus' days was one of the most religious cities to ever exist in human history? There was absolutely no shortage of religion. In fact, you can go there now and see the ruins to literally hundreds of temples in which people worship thousands of gods. If you are a Roman person, wanted to get involved in religion, wanted a place where you could pay your tithes, wanted a place where a priest could counsel with you, wanted a place where you could try to get what you wanted from the divine, you had your pick. Jesus did not send his disciples to be another haven for the religious people of Rome. That's why he wouldn't let them set up a temple. He set them out to do something altogether different. That's the first mission parameter. The second parameter of our mission to Rome is that Macon doesn't need another pastor. This is just the truth. Now, I don't want to overplay this hand. I certainly don't want to disrespect the office and the calling of pastor. I believe that God has given me that spiritual gift mix, and I'm thrilled to death to be serving in that capacity here at Cross Connection Church. But let's be frank. There is no community leader in this town that woke up at any point this week, this month, this year, or this decade thinking, if only we had one more pastor in this town, the crime rate would go down, and education would improve, and nobody would be poor anymore in Macon, and people would get involved in bettering their community. It has not happened. There's no unchurched person waking up now groggy from the hangover that they earned last night thinking, if just some 32-year-old balding white guy would move down here from Atlanta, if we could just get one more pastor, I'd start investing in my marriage. I'd become a better father. I'd quit drinking my weekends away, and I'd get involved in committing my life to God. Come on, people. We are not one pastor away from accomplishing anything. And what I love about the mission of Jesus in Acts chapter 1 is that Jesus is not all geeked out about who the leader is. Isn't that cool? Before Jesus ascends to heaven, he doesn't assign job descriptions and titles. He doesn't say, okay, you're in charge and you're not, and you're the pastor and you're the lady. He doesn't do any of that whatsoever. Jesus gives the mission to all of them. This cult of leadership that we have in 21st century America never happened. It was not in play in the early church. The focus was not on the leader. The focus was on the mission to win the hearts of the Romans. So what's our strategy? And how are we really going to accomplish that? If the answer is not a pastor, and the answer is not just having a church on this corner, what's our strategy to reaching into Rome, to reaching the unchurched people of Macon? I think it's three things. Number one, to create an experience where unchurched people encounter God's love. To create an experience where unchurched people encounter God's love. If I were to ask the random person on the street, and many of you sitting in these chairs this morning, what is the competition that Cross Connection Church faces each Sunday morning in the town of Macon? Most people would say out there, they'd say, Ingleside Baptist and First Pres. You're vying for people from them. A Riverside United Methodist, a mile down the street on Riverside Drive. Nothing could be more mistaken than that. Because if our vision, if our goal is to go to Rome, not to reach the religious people in Israel, but to actually get to Rome where we don't have any common religious ground or faith-oriented ground with people, guess what we're competing against? Don't let this intimidate you. Every form of activity that an unchurched person might choose on Sunday morning instead of hanging out with us for an hour between 10:30 and 11:30. Every form of activity. The bed, the lake, the golf course, the Cracker Barrel. I can't imagine any other organization. And many of you are business guys. You know exactly who your competition is. You know exactly who's trying to steal your market share. I can't imagine any business in which they say, our primary form of competition is everything. Everything people do except engage in life together with us. You know what that means for us? It means that this experience between 10:30 and 11:30 has to be so crafted, so intentional, so worth people's time, such an exciting environment that people walk out those doors saying, you know, I'm not really sure about the belief thing yet. I'm not sure about God and Jesus. I'm not sure I really jive with the way that they think. But man, that environment spoke to me. I felt so encouraged by interacting with those people. And listen, I'm not talking about having the great worship that we have and having a preacher who can deliver a message that impacts people. I'm talking about a total experience, an environment in which outsiders are embraced as insiders because there is no division between outsider and insider when people step through those doors. It can happen, but only if it's our mission to go to Rome, to go to the ends of the earth, and to reach the unchurched. The second part of our strategy is to connect to unchurched people in our homes. To connect to unchurched people in our homes. The early church movement was a living room movement. In fact, when Jesus issued this great impossible mission to his disciples, did you know that it would be 200 years before the first church building was ever built and put into use? For 200 years, which was, of course, the time of the greatest, most explosive growth of Christianity. For 200 years, there were no church buildings whatsoever. People met in living rooms. People met around food. People met around dinner tables. And in that environment, the unchurched were invited into the homes of these early Christians, and they were embraced as friends and family. And in time, Christianity took over the Roman Empire. So here at Cross Connection, we are not going to have 8 million things going on here on this campus. That is not our vision. If you want a church that's got a ministry for every little subgroup that you can imagine, I'm sure there are plenty in this town. That is absolutely and definitively not us. You know why? Because we want to reclaim the legacy of the early Christian movement that did church in homes. We want to connect with unchurched people in our homes. It can happen, but only if we're committed to this mission that Jesus has given us, to go into the heart of Rome, to reach the unchurched all around us. And the third part of our strategy that you'll see on the outline, to get to Rome and to impact the unchurched, is to invite unchurched people to serve on a ministry team. To invite, I want to be clear, to invite not Christians, to invite not people who have passed our dogmatic doctrinal test, not people who we know are set up to be the perfect apex of Christian leadership in our church. I said it right, to invite unchurched people to serve on a ministry team. You know, I was thinking earlier this week that every major epoch, every major era of Christianity includes kind of a revolution of the way the church ministers, what the church particularly focuses on. So for those of you who remember history class back in school, you may remember the Reformation with Martin Luther 500 years ago. That was more or less, I think, a revolution of salvation. People came to understand that salvation is not something we earn. It's something that God gives us by His grace alone. A couple hundred years later, a guy named John Wesley showed up. He founded the great Methodist tradition that's still a big deal in the state of Georgia today. John Wesley enforced a revolution of relationship. People began to understand that God wanted to walk with them personally, that they could have a personal devotional life with God each day. They could live a fulfilling spiritual life. Well, guess what? I think there is a new revolution, and we stand on the precipice of it right now. You know what? I think it's a revolution of significance. People out there are so strung out. They're working more hours for less money than they ever have. They've got family responsibilities. I mean, people are just going pedal to the metal all the time, just trying to survive in this economy, but just hoping that they can eat and keep the lights on. You know what they're hungering for? Living beyond themselves. People out there are hungering for significance. We've got the opportunity to meet that hunger here at Cross Connection Church. We're not going to meet it by saying that leadership positions and places of service in this church are only for the uber committed or only for the super Christian. It's not going to work that way at all. Instead, how many unchurched people would be here right now if people just like you and me buttonholed them when they came in the door and said, God needs your service. God needs your servanthood. God needs you to make a difference in this local church and in this community through serving. Because we as Christians believe that the crux of Jesus' teaching is that significance is achieved not through achievement and not through money and not through being in some leadership position, but significance is achieved through servanthood. We've got to hold that pathway out to the unchurched people who walk through those doors. As John comes to the stage right before we pray, I want to leave you with this. The most amazing thing about the book of Acts and all that we've been talking about is that in a few short decades, did you know that the early church, these 12 guys, spawned a movement that achieved the mission that Jesus laid out in Acts chapter 1. In fact, if you flip to the very end of the book, and maybe you want to do that later, guess what you'll find? A dude named Paul sharing the message, mission, and revolution of Jesus in the very lion's den, in the household of Caesar. It's remarkable to think about that what started on that dusty Judean road, they ended up achieving the mission. And we can too. The mission goes on. The mission is still out there. And the mission is still impossible. Nobody thinks much about the Roman Empire anymore, do they? Even though it was such a big deal back then. It's been relegated to museums where you can look at a bunch of white marble statues with the arms and legs cut off. But we're still sitting in this room right now because Jesus' mission stands. And we need to take care of it. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 19, verse 26, with man this is impossible, but not with God. With God, even the impossible